You know, they say intuition is a powerful thing, and for a long time I thought my marriage was solid. Rachel and I had been married for 10 years, together for 13. We had our routines, our little quirks, and a life that seemed, on the surface, pretty good. But lately, something felt off. You know that feeling when you just know something isn't right? That's where I was. Rachel started working late more often, and her phone became practically glued to her hand. One night, she went out to buy some stuff for the home, which was odd because she hated running errands. When she came back several hours later, she had this odd look in her eyes, like she was somewhere else. And she'd gone with a male friend I didn't know, which set off alarm bells. That night, after she fell asleep, I found myself looking through her phone. I know it's not something I'm proud of, but my gut was screaming at me. She had been messaging someone named Brandon. At first it seemed innocent enough, just work stuff. But the frequency and the tone of the messages changed. They were getting more personal, more intimate. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had seen. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a harmless friendship. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. The way she had been acting lately, distant, preoccupied, and more irritable, it all started to make sense. The next morning, I decided to keep an eye on her. I needed more proof before I confronted her. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs. She would dress up more than usual for work, spend extra time on her appearance, and she was always texting. One evening, she mentioned a work trip coming up. Another red flag. I decided to follow her, to see where she was really going. I took a day off work and tailed her when she left the house. She met Brandon at a coffee shop, and they looked way too comfortable with each other. Laughing, touching, the whole 9 yards. My stomach churned as I watched them. I snapped a few photos with my phone, needing concrete evidence of what I suspected. Back home, I tried to act normal, but inside I was boiling. The betrayal cut deep. I needed to know more. I started digging into her emails, her social media, anything I could find. It wasn't long before I uncovered more messages, photos, and plans for future meetups. The evidence was irrefutable. My wife was cheating on me with my boss. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions at work, barely able to concentrate. My mind was consumed with thoughts of Rachel and Brandon. How could she do this to me, to us? The rage and sadness were overwhelming, but I knew I had to keep it together. I needed a plan. The first step was confronting Brandon. I couldn't just let this slide. I arranged to meet him under the pretense of discussing a work project. But when we met, it quickly became clear that this was going to be anything but professional. As we sat in a quiet corner of the bar, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I know about you and Rachel. I know everything." His face went pale, and he stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. But I wasn't interested in his lies. I leaned in closer, my voice low and dangerous. "You're going to tell me everything, right now." Brandon squirmed in his seat, clearly panicked. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route, but there was none. He was trapped, and he knew it. "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. "It just did. Rachel and we just connected." "Connected?" I spat the word out like it was poison. "You connected with my wife? What the hell does that even mean, Brandon?" He took a deep breath, visibly trying to steady himself. We started talking at work, just casual conversations. But over time it became more. We realized we had a lot in common and things just escalated. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" "A few months," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not what you think. We never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You never meant to hurt me. Are you serious? You're screwing my wife, Brandon. How did you think that would play out?" He had no answer for that, just hung his head in shame. I could feel my anger boiling over, but I needed to stay focused. "You're going to end it," I said firmly. "Tonight, you're going to tell her it's over, and you're going to stay away from her. Do you understand?" Brandon nodded vigorously. "Yes, I understand. I'll end it. I promise." "Good," I said, standing up, "because if you don't, I will ruin you. Do you understand that too?" "Yes," he whispered, his face ashen. I walked away, leaving him to stew in his guilt and fear. The next step was Rachel. Confronting her would be the hardest part, but it had to be done. I couldn't let this betrayal go unchecked. That night, I waited for Rachel to come home. My mind raced with 1,000 scenarios, but I knew I had to stay calm. When she walked through the door, she gave me a tired smile. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked. "Fine," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She looked at me, puzzled. "About what?" "About you and Brandon," I said bluntly. Her face drained of color, and she stumbled back a step. What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Rachel," I snapped. "I know everything. I've seen the messages, the photos. I know you've been cheating on me with him." She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "How about the truth?" I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "How about you start with that?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she buried her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why?" I demanded. "Why did you do it?" "I don't know," she cried. "I was lonely, and Brandon was there. It just happened. But it didn't mean anything. I swear. Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and you say it didn't mean anything? How do you expect me to believe that?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what to say to make this right." "You can't make this right, Rachel," I said, my voice hardening. "You've destroyed our marriage. There's no coming back from this." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Mike, don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. Please, just give me a chance." I shook my head, feeling the weight of her betrayal crushing me. "No, Rachel, it's over. Pack your things and leave." She broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. But I couldn't afford to be swayed by her tears. The trust between us was shattered, and there was no way to piece it back together. As she gathered her belongings, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was not the life I had envisioned, but it was the reality I had to face. Watching her walk out the door, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Now, it was time to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward. The battle was far from over, but at least the truth was finally out in the open. After Rachel left, the silence in the house was deafening. I wandered from room to room, my mind replaying the events of the past few days. The evidence of her betrayal was everywhere. In the messages on her phone, in the pictures I had taken, in the way she had looked at me when she realized I knew the truth. The weight of it all was crushing. I knew I couldn't let it end there. Rachel's betrayal had to be addressed head-on, and not just with her. There was another person who needed to be confronted. My boss, Brandon. The man who had not only betrayed me as a friend, but also as a superior at work. The next day at work, I kept my cool. I went through the motions, waiting for the right moment. I saw Brandon in the break room, chatting with some colleagues, pretending like everything was normal. The sight of him made my blood boil, but I took a deep breath and approached him calmly. "Brandon, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. He looked up, his expression wary. "Mike, Not here," I cut him off. "Let's go somewhere private." We walked to an empty conference room. As soon as the door closed behind us, I let my anger show. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "You were supposed to be my friend, my boss, and you went behind my back and slept with my wife." Brandon's face was a mask of guilt. "Mike, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "That's a hell of a mistake, Brandon. You've destroyed my marriage. You think sorry is going to fix that?" He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I know I messed up, but you have to believe me. I never wanted it to go this far. Rachel and we got caught up in something, and it spiraled out of control." "Spiraled out of control?" I repeated. "You make it sound like it was an accident, but you made a choice, Brandon. You both did." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "You're right. We did. And I'm so sorry, Mike. If I could take it back, I would." "Well, you can't," I said coldly. "You can't take it back, but you can do one thing for me." "Anything," he said quickly. "I'll do anything to make this right." "Resign," I said firmly. "I don't want to see your face at work ever again. I can't work under someone who betrayed me like this." Brandon's face paled. Mike, please, I've worked so hard to get where I am. This job means everything to me, and my marriage meant everything to me, I shot back. But you didn't think about that, did you? You made your choice, Brandon. Now you have to live with the consequences. He looked down, defeated. All right, I'll resign. But please, Mike, don't do anything rash. This was a mistake, but I still respect you as a person. Respect? I scoffed. You lost my respect the moment you touched my wife. Now get out of my sight. Brandon left the room, and I felt a small sense of victory. It wasn't much, but it was something. I needed to reclaim some semblance of control over my life, and this was a start. When I got home that evening, the house felt emptier than ever. Rachel's absence was a constant reminder of the betrayal, but I knew I couldn't let it consume me. There was still one more confrontation I needed to have, with Rachel herself. I called her and told her to come over. She sounded hesitant, but agreed. When she arrived, we sat in the living room, the tension between us palpable. I talked to Brandon, I began. He's resigning. Rachel looked surprised. What? Why? Because I can't work with someone who betrayed me like that, I said simply. And now we need to talk about what happens next. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I know I hurt you, Mike, and I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know how much I regret what I did. Regret doesn't change what happened, I said quietly. You broke my trust, Rachel, and that's something that can't be easily repaired. I know, she whispered, but I want to try. I want to fix this, if you'll let me. I looked at her, seeing the woman I had loved and the stranger who had betrayed me. There's no fixing this, I said firmly. We're done. I need you to pack your things and leave. She looked at me, stunned. What? No, Mike, please, we can work through this. There's nothing to work through, I said coldly. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Rachel broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, Mike, don't do this. I'll do anything. Anything? I repeated. It's too late for that. Get your things and go. She stood up, her body shaking with sobs, and began packing her belongings. I watched her, feeling a strange sense of detachment. This was the woman I had once loved. But now she was just a painful reminder of betrayal. As she packed, I began gathering evidence. I printed out all the messages, photos, and any proof of her affair. I placed them in a binder, knowing I would need them for the next steps. This was not just about ending our marriage. It was about ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions. When she was done, I handed her the binder. Here, I said. You'll need this for the divorce. She looked at it, her eyes wide with shock. You're divorcing me? What did you expect? I said, my voice hard. That we just go back to how things were? No, Rachel. We're done. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Mike. I really am. Sorry doesn't change anything, I said. Now go. Rachel left, and I closed the door behind her, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Now it was time to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward. The battle was far from over, but at least the truth was finally out in the open. With Rachel gone, the house was eerily quiet. But the silence wasn't a comfort. It was a reminder of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the end of a marriage that I thought was unbreakable. I wasn't going to let Rachel and Brandon get away with this without facing the consequences. First, I needed to make sure Rachel felt the full weight of what she had done. I gathered all the evidence I had collected, the messages, the photos, and detailed logs of her affair. I created a document outlining everything, sparing no detail. It was painful to compile, but it was necessary. I wanted her to understand the extent of her betrayal. Once the document was complete, I packaged it up and sent copies to several key people in Rachel's life. Her parents, her siblings, and a few close friends. I wanted them to see the truth, to know what she had done. There was no going back from this. Rachel would have to face the judgment of those closest to her. Next, I turned my attention to Brandon. I wanted him to feel the same sense of loss and betrayal that I did. I contacted the HR department at work, providing them with all the evidence of the affair. I knew it would lead to disciplinary action and likely end his career at the company. I didn't care about the fallout. He had crossed a line, and he needed to be held accountable. As expected, Brandon was called into HR for a meeting. The news spread quickly through the office. His reputation was shattered, and he was put on immediate leave while an investigation took place. I could see the fear and humiliation in his eyes whenever I passed him in the halls. It was a small victory, but it was satisfying nonetheless. But my revenge didn't stop there. I wanted to make sure Rachel and Brandon felt the impact financially as well. I met with my lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. Given the evidence of infidelity, I aimed to ensure that Rachel would receive as little as possible in the settlement. It was a ruthless move, but I felt justified. The legal battle was grueling, but I was determined. I fought for everything. The house, the savings, even the car. Rachel tried to negotiate, pleading for leniency, but I stood my ground. She had made her choices, and now she had to deal with the consequences. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. Rachel was left with almost nothing. With the divorce finalized, I decided to sell the house. It held too many painful memories. I put it on the market and found a smaller place, somewhere I could start fresh. It was a new beginning, and I was ready for it. Rachel tried to reach out to me a few times, begging for forgiveness, asking for another chance, but my resolve was firm. There was no going back. I had made my decision, and I was moving forward. I blocked her number and cut off all contact. She was no longer a part of my life. As for Brandon, he was fired from the company. His career was in ruins, and his personal life wasn't much better. Word had spread about the affair, and his reputation was in tatters. He tried to find work elsewhere, but the scandal followed him. It was a fitting end for a man who had betrayed a friend so deeply. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, started new hobbies, and slowly but surely, I began to heal. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it had once been. I was moving on. One evening, while I was sitting in my new home, a sense of peace washed over me. The storm had passed, and I had come out the other side. Stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. Rachel and Brandon were nothing more than a painful memory. A chapter in my life that was now closed. Life would go on, and so would I.